Hey everyone, I'm Andy Petronic, and this is the Whole Life Challenge podcast. It's the place we connect with extraordinary people, ones who think differently, who have risen to the top of their field, who have vast knowledge, experience, and insights to share, as well as incredible stories to tell. They are also the ones who have figured out a way to take their life's experience and turn it into something that truly makes a difference in the world for others. These are their stories. Hey everyone, it's Andy Petronic. I'm not going to start the podcast the same way as usual this week because I've got some really big news. Well, it's really big news for me. It's not going to affect your listening of the podcast in any way, shape, or form, or where you'll find it. But it will affect how you reference this podcast because we're changing its name. We're rebranding it from the Whole Life podcast to the Andy Petronic podcast. Now, I just want to explain a little bit. This wasn't really started back when we did episode 1 as a quote-unquote podcast. It was an experiment into the world of kind of talking to people. And I think I did about 5 or 6 episodes back in episodes like 1 through 6, and then stopped. And then Michael and I used it to, talk to people about their performance in the Whole Life Challenge. And we we introduced some of the lifestyle practices, and we brought people, team captains in. We talked to people. It was really a platform for the Whole Life Challenge. And about a year and a half ago, I decided to take it on as a personal project of my own because I really love talking to new people that I've never met who are all influencers in the world of health and well-being. And I wanted a reason to be able to pick up the phone and call them, or send an email out to them. Something that was some reason to have a serious conversation about what was going on for them, what in terms of their expertise in life. And I felt like the podcast would be a podcast like that was committed every week, new guests, et cetera, would be a really great way to do that. And not knowing how to think of it any way outside of the world of the Whole Life Challenge, it just was natural continuation of the Whole Life Challenge podcast. We'll give it a label, but it's really, since that time, which is about episode 45 or something like that, it's really taken on a different feel, because it's really a show that I do. It's independent from Michael Stanwyck, who's my co-founder. He supports it. He loves the fact that I'm doing it, but it falls outside of the world of our normal staff, the work that our staff does. They help me get it up and put it on the website, but it's really been kind of a little satellite project of my own. And I'm left in my own, to my own devices to develop the style, the feel, the guests, find the guests. And it's really based on my view of the world and what I want to bring to the audience, to you. Because I feel that the compelling stories in the world need to be told. And I want to make sure that the stories that I find, that the people that I feel have those compelling stories, I want them all in one place. And they're still going to be on the Whole Life Challenge website. It's the Andy Petronic podcast. It will be on the Whole Life Challenge website. So it's not as massive of a change as it might. I don't know if it sounds massive or not. It's massive for me. I'll tell you what. Putting my name on something. I talked about this a little bit before because I have a new website also, andypetronic.com. I've been reticent to put my name in the lights, to put my name front and center on things, and to claim my, my piece of land. It doesn't serve as well as it could were it more out in front. And that's really the other intention of this, is to get me out in front, more in my zone of discomfort, out of my comfort zone, is what I was trying to say. And it's doing that. I'm uncomfortable right now just even talking about it. But you're going to notice new artwork. Don't know when that's going to propagate through iTunes, but it should be soon. You'll notice the new title. You'll notice, my Bitly link changing. You'll notice email addresses changing. It will happen probably within this week. But I really appreciate all the words of encouragement I've had. I've been told by so many people that I need to do this. I've been told for years. One of my greatest friends, Scott Zagarino, told me this, 10 years ago. Dude, you need your name on this stuff. You need to, your story is amazing. You need to be out in front of this. And, it's not been my way. So now it is my way. And we're changing its name, the Andy Petronic Podcast, and it will, like I said, it'll live on the Whole Life Challenge page, just where you've always seen it. It'll also live on my website. So it'll have a feed there on my website at andypetronic.com. And by the way, if you're interested in finding out more about the things that I think are really compelling, listening, reading, understanding, apps, stuff like that, I share. I have a really, it's a rather short and succinct newsletter that I put out once a month. It comes out on the first of every month. And I've had great feedback on it. I've done exactly one issue. So the next issue is coming out on March 1st. And you can subscribe at my website, andypetronic.com. So that's the big news. That's the big announcement. And let's get on with the rest of the podcast, shall we? I'm gonna try to cut this a little bit shorter than usual because I spent so much time talking about this change. This is episode number 129 of the Whole Life Challenge podcast, and my guest today is Ryan Munsey. He is the host of the Better Human podcast. He's a longtime fitness. He's been in the fitness world for a long time. He's a biohacker. He's a scientist. He's been a fitness model. He's like a vault, like a treasure box of information about performance and improving performance. And he's the host of the Better Human Project podcast. And that's a new thing for him. He started it not long ago. I think I was one of the first two guests on his podcast, and that was back at the beginning of the year. So, he also has a brand new book out. In fact, it's being released this week, and I'm not going to curse right now. You'll hear the real title of the book with a real word, but, the first word of the book is F, and it's F your feelings. And, look, if you don't like curse words, I don't blame you. I don't particularly like them either, but they serve a purpose and they wake you up. They get your attention. And I think that's really Ryan's intention in the title of this. Feelings, and he explains this really well in the podcast, feelings get in the way of your growth and your progress. Very often your feelings dictate actions rather than your sense or your values, the things you're really committed to, dictating your actions. And that's really the subject, the purpose of the book is to explore that and to give readers the ability to both become aware of it and some tools as to how to shift that. So I'm not going to go into any more details of the podcast because, like I said, I'm going to cut this introduction a little bit shorter than usual. But suffice it to say, we talk about a lot of really cool stuff. He brings up quite a lot of books and authors and tips and hacks that he uses, and some of the foundational elements of the book. So it's highly worth it. I would get out a pen and piece of paper and be prepared to take some notes. He's also got a really fun story, so you'll enjoy that as well. The next thing I want to let you know is that this episode is brought to you today by The Good Kitchen. They're our first ever sponsor of the Whole Life Challenge, and they supply to anyone who orders right to their doorstep, organic, fully prepared, beautifully packaged, sustainable food meals that are delicious. They come to you in a FedEx container that is, they come into you either once a week or twice or once every 2 weeks. I just got my shipment yesterday of 20 meals. They'll stay in my refrigerator. They're vacuum sealed. They'll stay in my refrigerator for a couple weeks. I'm going to share those with some other people because I don't think I can possibly eat 20 of those meals in 2 weeks. It's just a lot. So, but fortunately we are, I'm spreading that around to a few of the other people in the Whole Life Challenge world so that they get a chance to experience the deliciousness of the Good Kitchen. And one of the best things I've ever did was to let go of my need to prepare lunches for myself. So I use them typically for lunch. In fact, a lot of times I don't even heat them up and they're still freaking delicious. So, but they will send you out breakfasts, lunch, dinners. In fact, look, if you've never tried home delivered food, I suggest giving it a try. It's worth a try. I mean, you're going to part with a little bit of money, but I can help you out a little bit with that. It's, you get 15% off your first order if you use the link, thegoodkitchen.com/WLC, thegoodkitchen.com/WLC. Let's see. Let's talk about Fan of the Week. So I started doing Fan of the Week about 5 months ago, and it's really done wonders for the number of ratings and reviews we're getting in iTunes, which is the purpose. If you love a podcast, the best way to tell the person that's running the podcast, the best way to help the podcast get out in the world more is to leave it a review or rating, both. But really the review helps more than the rating. In iTunes. So I read a Fan of the Week, somebody that's written a review. And if you like the idea of your review getting read, I would love it if you would go to iTunes and leave a review. Here's how you do that. Go to bit.ly, bit.ly/WLC podcast, WLC-podcast. If you're a longtime listener and you've never left a review and you love one of the episodes you listen to, please go do it. I'd love it. I'll be super, super appreciative. This week I'm going to read the newest review. It's from someone named Crispy7-4. And here's what he or she says. Rich with awesome information. I was on the hunt for a new and interesting information on health and fitness when I bumped into the Whole Life Challenge podcast. I've listened to episodes 122 through 125, one right after the other, and was compelled to purchase 2 books that I'm pumped to read. I'm getting exactly what I was looking for. This is a great listen. I look forward to more. Thank you, Crispy7-4. By the way, if you hear your review read on the podcast and you send me an email at podcast, right now this is the email, podcast@wholelifechallenge.com, we will shoot you out a t-shirt. So please do that. And I'd love to get you a t-shirt as a small token of my appreciation. That's it. Let's get on with it. This is the last week of the Whole Life Challenge. The challenge ends after 6 weeks of, accountability. And then we get 6 weeks off and we start again in April. Look, the long journey means you're engaging in the challenge regular 2, 3, 4 times a year. I do it every time. So, that's really what we're going for. The long ball, not can you make it through 6 weeks? So I hope you'll join me in the April challenge, and let's get on with the podcast. So get ready, guys. Here we go with the one, the only Ryan Munsey. I'm recording. Yeah, we're live and I'll do an introduction more about you in the future before this podcast goes up, but so people will know a little bit more about you before they dive in. But we haven't really spent a lot of time together. We quick story for everybody listening. You were out for the Bulletproof conference, and I was not able to go to the Bulletproof conference because I had 2 Little League baseball games that weekend, and not that I'm managing or coaching, but I like to go to all Dashiell's, as many of his games as I can. My philosophy around parenting is I've only got one child, so I got one shot. This is the shot, and this age from like 7 until about, I'm guessing 14. I got like 3 more years maybe until hormones, run crazy, and he's like, "Get lost, Dad." So I'm putting that as my number one priority when there are choices to make. I couldn't get the words out. And so I missed the Bulletproof conference, but then we met at coffee at the Bulletproof Cafe Monday morning with my friend Eric.
One of our many mutual friends arranged some sort of little sit down with a bunch of people, and we got to connect that way.
Yeah, that was cool. So and now we're on a podcast together, and we haven't really spent. I was telling Ryan before we started that I don't really have an agenda. Like I don't have this. A lot of guests I have that I know exactly what we're going to talk about, and this one is loose and kind of fun. I really enjoy conversations like that. So
I do too.
So why don't you tell everybody what you're up to, what you've been up to, your work with Natural Stacks, and where you're at today.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start from the beginning, and I'll try to make this brief. If there's anything in the resume that you want to dig into a little deeper, we can do that. I grew up playing sports, was an athlete my whole life. Went to college at Clemson University, was not a good enough athlete to play there. And
Clemson's not known for athleticism or anything.
No, not at all. Not
really? You couldn't be a walk-on their football team? Come on.
No.
What a surprise.
I did have a lot of friends who actually played sports there. And interesting, my best friend from high school actually got a track scholarship. He was a high jumper at Clemson. And he actually won the ACC title in high jump 7 times. He's the most decorated athlete in ACC history.
Wow.
Which, that includes people like Michael Jordan, Michael Vick, anybody else you can name. So anyway, because of our friendship and, the way that I filled that missing competitive void, like a lot of other athletes do, I was in the weight room. I found bodybuilding and lifting and started tagging along with him at track practice. I mean, it was a non-revenue sport. They don't care. They'd give me, an extra pair of the, team issued shoes and shorts, and I'd just show up and act like I was, they're like, hey, just don't draw any attention to yourself. Don't cause any trouble, and nobody will say anything. So it's track. There's a lot of kids on the team, and just pretend like you're a walk-on. And I mean, I was literally at arm's length from great athletes, people who ran the 100 meters in the Olympics, people who returned kickoffs in the NFL for touchdowns. And, it was at that moment that, anybody who's been in fitness or sport or any endeavor in life, when you see somebody who is at the highest level, you're looking at someone or something different. And that was the first moment where I became obsessed with human potential, human performance. And,
was your major exercise phys or fitness or sports, or what were you studying?
So my original major was packaging science. And as I started to go,
What is that? I don't even know what that is. I didn't know that was a thing. Packaging what? Packaging like
packaging
meat?
Science.
Packaging what?
Yeah.
What do you...
Meat, eggs, anything. Really low tech science of, the egg carton, like how do you keep eggs from breaking? Or it could be, higher tech, like modified atmosphere packaging, where, if you look at meat on the shelf, a lot of those products, they have the oxygen is sucked out and they pump in nitrogen before they seal it, so that you reduce the oxygen exposure to meat, prolonging shelf life without having to use preservatives. So it was cool. I got into it because my dad sells packaging, and he had a pretty cool lifestyle. And at the time when I was a freshman, he didn't want me to go in as undeclared. He wanted me to choose a major. And Clemson was one of 4 schools at the time that had that as a major, had 100% job placement. And
right.
like, well, let's start here.
Yeah.
But as I got into, what I was learning on my own and what I was experiencing lifting weights, and, I started reading Elite Fitness and T Nation and all these other sites. I was at Clemson from 2002 to 2008. So that's sort of the timeline for all of this. Especially like 2004 to 2008 was when I was really, really getting into it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to change majors to exercise physiology, but they didn't offer that. The closest thing I could get was food science and human nutrition.
How big is Clemson? Are they a Division I school, right?
Yeah.
How many?
D1.
But how many kids? How many students?
Somewhere between 12 and 16,000.
So it's not huge.
No, it's not a big school.
Right.
Medium size, I guess.
Like my wife went to IU, and then, it's like a city. It's 30,000 or 40,000. It's a huge thing. And I went to a tiny school, a D3, University of Rochester, where we had like 4,000 students, I think. So
it's the dynamic in Clemson, South Carolina is just, it's unlike anything I had ever seen or have seen since then. The town, people ask where it is. It's in Clemson, South Carolina. And I think it's a town of like 11,000 people outside of the college. And it goes from this tiny town on a college, like a home college football Saturday, it becomes the 3rd largest city in the state of South Carolina.
That's like Penn State. Yeah, totally.
You just have this swarm of orange. And I, honestly, when I was a high school senior and I was visiting colleges, we went there on a Saturday and I just looked at my dad and I was like, yeah.
That's right. That's cool. I can see why you do that and say that.
Yeah. So that was sort of that was the genesis of my obsession with human performance, human potential, as I call it. And then, I changed majors, started studying food science and human nutrition as I was training, as I was watching these guys. I learned sprint technique from some of the best coaches in the world, performance training and strength training. And I really became obsessed with the way we could manipulate variables, whether it be the food that we eat, the way that we train, all of these things to, change ourselves and become, stronger, faster, leaner, smarter, whatever. And when I left Clemson, I had 2 choices. Somehow I got into bodybuilding, which led to competing in modeling events. Wow. And I was offered a modeling contract with an agency in New York City. So option 1 was go to New York City and be a fitness model. Option 2 was become an RD, which required me to do an internship. And that was an internship that I had to apply for and then pay them to do so that I could be trained in methods that I actually became very unsatisfied with. In the schooling, half of the curriculum is every science class you can imagine. And then the other half of the curriculum is, all the nutrition coursework. And everything that we were being taught in the nutrition coursework in terms of, how do you plan a diet? How do you teach this stuff in the community? All of those recommendations, everything that we were being taught and kind of fed was, we know this now, and that was my first exposure to it, that it's funded by, big food, big pharma, all these powers that be that you and people like us are fighting in our movements and our missions today. And I'm sitting in those classes and I'm the kid in the back of class. I'm eating my can of tuna with an avocado and I'm raising my hand and, everybody in front of me is turning around. I'm like, oh, what's that smell? That kid in the back is eating tuna again or sardines. And, everything that we learned in the science class is saying something completely opposite. So I have this science background and that's just the way my mind works. I question things. I want to go through that scientific method. And, so when I graduated, I did not want to go that route. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'll go to New York and see what this fitness modeling thing can do. I really wanted that to be something that would help me build a platform where I could use that platform to educate people on, everything that we were being told, incorrectly. It was, in my own pursuits outside of class where I was, being introduced to, things like the paleo world and the Joel Salatins and people like that. And, I really wanted to create a platform and to use it to educate people and help sort of, conquer all of that misinformation that was out there.
While you were modeling, while you were in New York City and doing that. Yeah.
I mean, that was, even back then I realized that I needed some sort of a reason for people to listen to me.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be the thing that would get me a platform. It wasn't. That wasn't where I wanted to, spend the rest of my life, and wasn't just where I wanted to be. I stayed there for 2008. And then 2009, I moved home to Roanoke, Virginia.
What's the world of modeling? I mean, what is that like? I've always kind of wondered. I've worked with some models because I've done photo shoots for CrossFit stuff when I first started doing CrossFit, and some hired models from agencies for Men's Health, for Men's Journal. But I never really got a chance to relate to them as humans. They were just there to do the job,
It looking back, like, it was a very transactional, very inhuman, very superficial world. It didn't take me long to realize that wasn't where I wanted to be. You are literally judged by your photographs. Like, you would walk into, every day you would get a text towards the end of the day, and it would have all of your castings for the following day. And then, the next day you show up, you go to these castings, and, a lot of them you sit down and you wait in the waiting room, or you stand in line. Sometimes you walk right in, but you walk in, you hand them your portfolio, your book. They look at pictures of you and decide whether or not they want to have a conversation with you. And they either hand it back to you and say, thanks, see you later, or then they start asking you questions. And I mean, as a model, you are an extreme commodity.
Right.
Yeah, I don't mean that in a good way. I mean, it's like you're a dime a dozen. There's tons and tons of good looking people, very fit people, and it's a weird industry. Without going off on too much of a tangent, one of the things that really turned me off to the industry was I had offers to get big time gigs, but they required me to do things that weren't in alignment with my values. So I said no. I don't know that that's what everybody has to do to have success, but that wasn't what I was going to do. I wanted to be able to sleep at night, when I put my head on my pillow, and know that I made choices that I was okay with. So it was a weird place. I have a lot of friends that are, still doing it and doing well. Hopefully their experiences have been different than mine.
I imagine that's really hard as a post-collegiate, living in New York City, potentially broke person to have the value, and to have the wherewithal to say no, in spite of your upbringing. I mean, do you attribute that to just some really solid upbringing from your parents? Like, where did you get that gumption? Where did you get that intestinal strength to be able to do that?
Yeah, I guess it comes from my parents. I mean, I think integrity and values have always been something that's really important to me. Doing the right thing for the right reasons. I think that's something I learned from both of my parents. I mean, my mom sacrificed a lot to, provide the lifestyle that I wanted. I can remember as a kid, she would drive an hour in the morning to work, an hour home from work, and then oftentimes drive me an hour to the other side of town to, practice for my travel teams. From her really just sacrificing for the people that matter to you. From my dad, just being able to show up and do the right thing. And, he's always been there for me and for anybody else in his life that depends on him. So I think those are two things that I really, really learned from my parents, and not so much from their words, but from their actions.
Yeah.
And I just deep down, I just knew it wasn't right. When I was given those choices, and they never sat well, when they were presented to me, it didn't feel right. And, I've always sort of been that type of person that, if it's not right, I'm not going to do it, no matter what money is involved. And I think, that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about a lot of the things in the world of health. And, as it relates to, what you do and whole life challenge, the values, how we spend our time. I just listened to the podcast that you did with Bobby Gill.
Oh yeah.
I've always been really passionate about food quality and food sourcing and just integrity in everything that we do, everything we consume, everything we create. So I guess that's where that came from.
Did you ever, were you ever faced with a decision that now you look back and go, oh man, that was a test that I'm not so happy with my what I did? Like, or do you have any, like where you learned maybe perhaps that served you in the future?
I'm sure that there are a few of those moments. I can't put my finger on one, but I'm positive that over the years I've made a few decisions that I regret, and maybe some of those happened before. I guess either high school or college, maybe relationships, and saying like, hey, I wish I'd handled some of these things better. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things where the problem will always go away. Most of our problems that we face in our daily life, they're short-term, they're temporary. But how you handle them in the moment is something that will stay with you and be part of your character and your reputation for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I never wanted those decisions to create a ripple effect that lasted longer than like any short-term benefit that may have come from, getting on a billboard in Times Square. That was going to be there for 2 months and then it was gone. The money would be spent, but for the rest of my life, I would have to live with the fact of, knowing that I made a certain decision, a certain choice.
Yeah. I'm just curious because how they always say that, a lot of times your greatest successes in life come from failures because you've either made bad decisions or you acted out in a emotional way where you might have been better suited to not. And, I just see that scenario, as just ripe with temptations and, opportunities that to make a dumb decision and not regret it in one hand, but on the other hand, learn from it, so that in the future it becomes more clear right away. Like, right. Oh, I've done this before and that just doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm sure on a smaller scale, I made a lot of those decisions and mistakes. I mean, it could have been, deciding to, give in to peer pressure, go to a certain party or try a certain thing or do a certain thing that, I thought in the moment would make me cool with my peers. And, afterwards, I said, that's really not me. That's not who I am. That's not what I want to do. Yeah. Maybe it was moments like those in high school or college that sort of led to that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I just think it's an interesting topic, and I'm not trying to press you into, there must have been one. There's got to be one in there somewhere.
It is an interesting topic. Yeah.
So anyway, so you left New York City. You're now enthused. Where did this alternative nutrition, where did you start gaining momentum around that? Did you read a book? Well, like, how did that start to weave its way into your life? And, you mentioned, Joel Salatin and, food. Well, yeah, go ahead. How did that come in? How did that come in?
Well, like I said, my education required all of the sciences. I took so many sciences, I can't even name all the classes anymore. I always tell people that like one of my classes was food and dairy microbiology. I had a semester that was like that dialed down. Like we went that many layers deep on the onion to where we had a semester of food and dairy microbiology.
Right.
So, biochem, organic chemistry, microbiology, whatever. So I'm learning in these classes how the body works. And that just fascinates me. I love understanding systems and then being able to say, okay, here's the system. How do we change what we put into the system to get the output that we really want? Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of become what biohacking is all about, or you can apply that logic to strength training or CrossFit training or any training. Anything. And I think, that's just how my mind works. So, as I was going through these classes, I realized I was going to have to educate myself because what was being spoon fed to me in the nutrition courses was not matching up with what I was learning.
Right.
So
right. You were getting good foundations in microbiology and chemistry and like how things worked, but in terms of like real life
application, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so at the same time, I mean, this is when I'm getting into bodybuilding. I'm getting into fitness modeling. So I'm trying to build muscle. I'm trying to lose fat. So I'm reading all of these sites. I think. At some point, that's when I came across Jeff Volek and what he called at that time, it was the anabolic diet or the TNT diet.
Okay.
That was my first experiment with extremely low carb. And I guess we would look back and call that a cyclic ketogenic diet, where like Monday through Friday, it was no carbs. And then you had a carb up on the weekends.
When you say no carbs, you really mean no carbs? No.
Low carb. It was low carb, high fat.
Right. Okay. Veggies are fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Veggies are typically everybody's free food. I mean, like, what diet doesn't say that veggies are not free? Like, as much as you want, right? Like, it could be Atkins. Yeah. It could be the opposite of Atkins, and it's veggies are free. Just load up.
Well, I just did for the month of November. I did the carnivore diet.
I was hoping you weren't going to say the potato diet because that was, like.
Veggies were not a free food on the carnivore.
Really?
Diet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a zero plant diet.
What did you eat? I mean, I know obviously meat. That's it. Literally meat.
Meat for 35 days. Nothing but meat and animal products.
So was yogurt okay?
No
yogurt.
No, it's a zero carb diet.
Zero, literally, you're not there.
Literally zero carb. I mean, it's like tons of ribeyes and bacon, and I ate a lot of organ meats, a lot of wild salmon, bone marrow, bone broth. I adapted it from what the traditional carnivores do to sort of include a lot of these things that we know help gut health and contain a lot of micronutrients because, and we can talk about this. It's definitely a tangent, but I did a really big write up on my blog. Recorded a podcast with a guy named Sean Baker, who is sort of the face of the carnivore diet. Mm-hmm. He was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about it. But I had heard about it, and it fascinated me because it challenged so much of what we think we know and believe about nutrition. And my first response was very dismissive. This is crazy.
Yeah, right. That's my first response right now in my head. Like, what?
So I'm willing to bet that for the next week, you will have the same response that I had. So it was almost like this bug that just got planted in your head. And then for like the next week to 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm like, well, what about this? What about micronutrients? What about fiber? Yeah. What about microbiome? And as I came up with each of these individual objections to the carnivore diet, I started looking it up, and I'm looking for people who have credible explanations or some sort of rationale for how this is not unhealthy. And I started finding people who were nutrition scientists and evolutionary, perspectives on why this might actually be viable. And I was like, all right, I got to try this.
For a period longer than a month? Like you could just live this way?
There are people who have done this for 20 years. There's one lady who was infertile, couldn't have children. She went through all sorts of treatments, and none of them ever worked. She went carnivore, and we're 20 years later. She's like healthy. She looks 10 years younger than most people.
She has 27 kids.
She's got 3 kids.
It's right.
There are a lot of anecdotes, and so this guy Sean Baker is really making a push to take N equals 1 to N equals many. And that's actually his website, N equals many. And he's recruited, I think they had like 400 people sign up for a 90-day experiment to do the carnivore diet. I think like 100 people completed it. There's always an attrition rate for people, with logging and then actually following through. And I'm sure you're very familiar with that with whole life challenges. But It's just fascinating. And yeah, I mean, he's
let me just ask you quickly. What's the fiber thing? Where do you get your fiber from?
We may not need it. That's the short answer.
Insoluble fiber. I mean, all the stuff I hear about the gut biome and the microbiome and how it feeds on the insoluble fiber that makes it down to your colon. I mean,
so here's the thing, and this is I am not a proponent of this diet. I am not somebody who's going to say this is the way we should eat.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated by it, and I'm not going to be so quick to say that it's wrong.
Yeah.
I wanted to try it and experience it. I did a stool test at day 30 to test my microbiome because I wanted that data.
Had you done a pre-test also at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the blood work I didn't have from immediately before, which I wish in hindsight that I had done that immediately before. But I guess my conclusions are, it was just so interesting. I lost body fat. I got stronger. Subjectively, I felt great. And now there's definitely an adaptation period. They call it the carnivore flu. It's very much like the keto flu. Mm-hmm. Maybe days 3 through 8 or 9, you kind of feel like poo. And once I got through that period, every single day was just great. Energy levels were solid. And even during that period, that adaptation phase, really the only place I struggled was in the gym. I just had no energy. I just didn't feel like lifting. But
micronutrients? What about micronutrients?
Well, so that's why I really focused on eating a lot of organ meats. I mean, we know liver has more micronutrients than almost any vegetable. So
how do you prepare liver to so that you like it?
I buy liverwurst from U.S. Wellness Meats.
And just how do you prepare it?
I don't.
You spoon it out of the.
I just need it. The liverwurst is it's like
Does
a
it come
sausage.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't experimented with that.
It's like a cooked sausage. I just slice that and eat it plain. I have not found a way to cook liver that I can tolerate. What I do with the liver that I have is I freeze it and I cut it into small chunks, and I just take a chunk out of the freezer and eat it.
A chunk of liverwurst.
No, a chunk of like
cooked,
if I actually have liver.
Got it.
Raw frozen liver. Yeah. Just cut a chunk off and eat that like one a day.
Raw?
Yeah.
My God.
It's brutal. It's brutal. I hate it. And that's why I found liverwurst as a much more appealing alternative.
How do they make liverwurst? What else is in it besides liver?
It has liver, heart, kidney, and just like excess from grass-fed beef.
It's like super organ meat pate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
And I think so it comes in, it's a pound, in the, like the actual sausage. And I think 1 pound is the equivalent of 4 ounces of liver, and that's like the amount that they say you're supposed to eat in a week. So even no matter what I'm doing, whether it's carnivore or not, I try to eat one of those a week.
One of those full sausages. And how much does that weigh? One of those?
It's a pound.
It's about a pound. So you eat about a pound a week of liverwurst.
Right. Which equates to about 4 ounces of liver.
Gotcha. But you're getting liver, you're getting heart, you're getting kidneys, you're getting other stuff as well. It's not just liver.
Correct.
I'm going to order some of that today. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I never thought of that as an option for. Yeah, I never thought of that as an option for liver. And I'm a person who very often I eat for convenience and ease, and I don't need to heat things up. Like I get food delivery from Territory, and I get my lunches, and they're all designed to be heated, and I never heat them. And like last night, we had leftovers from a party we had over the weekend. It was all barbecue and pulled pork and stuff. And my wife heated hers up, and I just took the cold stuff and ate it cold. And
I'm the exact same way. I have a nutrition degree. I've been trained in how to, I got food science. I know all this stuff, and I'll eat cold, pre-prepared food. And all my friends, they always say like, I can't believe you eat this stuff cold. And
I actually like it. I mean, I don't. It's not that I'm doing it because I'm only want. I'm so obsessed with like eat the right things. I actually like it. I mean, I don't mind it heated, but a lot of times if things like preparing food get in the way of me eating well, I won't eat well.
Right.
So given the choice between eating well, meaning quality foods, meaning, good stuff, given the choice between those two, I'd rather eat well and not heat the food or not prepare the food. So
that's sort of the conversation we were having earlier. What's more important, the long-term lasting effects of eating well or the short-term kind of transient enjoyment of the duration for which you're eating it?
Yeah, like ice cream.
Right.
That comes up a lot for me because I love ice cream. Haven't been able to shake that one.
That's a tough one to shake. So yeah, I mean, with carnivore, it was really interesting. I think, and this is what I'll say in regards to fiber and microbiome. The word microbiome first appeared in the scientific literature like 2001. So we're less than 20 years into understanding it.
We really don't know.
We really don't know. I mean, there's no other area of the human body where within 20 years of discovering it, we had a complete, full, accurate understanding. So we just don't know. And there are a lot of people in the evolutionary ancestral health space. Georgia Ede is one. Ann Childers is another one. And they've got some really, really educated opinions and points that they're convincing. Are they accurate? Are they 100% true? I don't know. But one of the arguments that I saw, I forget exactly who it came from, was, that compared to other apes, we traded a much smaller digestive system for the ability to be bipedal, stand upright, and have a much larger brain. So by having this smaller gut, smaller digestive system, we're not meant to eat as many leafy greens as, say, a gorilla or any of the other apes. We're not cows. We don't have 4 stomachs. We don't, ruminate and regurgitate and chew on these cuds over and over. Even John Rattay in the book Go Wild, which is a phenomenal book, talks about how humans are really, really poor at assimilating nutrients from plants. And from an evolutionary standpoint, we learned the number one way that we overcame that advantage was to outsource that job to animals. Mm-hmm. And then that goes into the whole part about, the conversation that you had with Bobby Gill, where, the importance of what those animals eat. Are they eating a variety of foods? Are they grazing? Are they roaming and getting a little bit of this grass, a little bit of that grass? Are they getting wild herbs, as opposed to standing in a feedlot, always being fed, glyphosate infested, corn and soy pellets?
Right.
So
you're right. I mean, you're right. We know so little. And that's a hard place to be. It's an exciting place to be, but it's kind of a hard place to be because there's no right answer. There's no, you can listen to this expert say one thing and that expert say another thing, and then you're like, well, what do I do? It's kind of like, well, eggs raise cholesterol and lead to heart disease. Oh, no, they don't. Oh, yes, they do. Oh, no, they don't. Which way do you go? So it's hard. It's a challenging thing.
Yeah. So, when we look at the micronutrient question, then you're looking at recommended daily intake, these RDIs. You just pointed out the exact argument that I made. When have these people ever been right?
That's right. Exactly.
Right. So why are we going to put all this faith in those numbers? And not only that, but we know that those numbers are based on someone eating a high carbohydrate standard American diet, which we've already agreed on is not the best way to eat. So I think, and I prefaced my blog post with, a warning. I just said, look, if you're looking for a prescription, if you're looking, if you're not comfortable challenging what you think just stop reading now, because I don't have answers. I'm asking questions, and, I'm trying to figure out, a potential something else. It's going through that scientific experimental process. So, it fascinates me and excites me, and it will be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, right. It will be. Well, let's go back to your story, because we jumped off into the carnivore diet. When I heard that, I was like, what? But you had moved back to Virginia and started the next part of your life.
Yeah. So when I was in New York, you mentioned being broke. I mean, that's like the most expensive city in the world.
Yeah.
I catered on the side. I started my career as a personal trainer up there and doing nutrition coaching for other models.
Were you CrossFitting when you were in New York? Were you what kind of training were you doing?
No, I was a trainer at a gym up there and was just doing workouts that I found on T Nation, very much
bodybuilding style.
Bodybuilding. I mean, everything was about the aesthetic during that portion because, obviously I'm going out on castings most days. So,
yeah, right. Totally.
But I've always, after my initial sort of foray into bodybuilding, I've always gravitated more towards low rep, nervous system intensive style of training. At that time, I read a lot of Christian Thibodeau's work on T Nation. So some of your listeners may be familiar with him. Mm-hmm. So
low rep meaning 5 reps, below 8 reps?
I'd say definitely below 8. Yeah, like 1 to 5.
1 to 5.
In that range.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, big fan of like Dan John, Pavel, guys like that. Chad Waterbury back then too. So when 2009, I came back to Virginia. My hometown is Roanoke, Virginia. Came back there and was just going to figure out the next move. I wasn't sure, if I wanted to pursue modeling in a different city, what I wanted to do. Got a job as a personal trainer at the Gold's Gym there. My friend was from high school was working there and doing really well and got me in there. And I met this woman who was a group instructor there. And as the story always goes,
trouble.
There's always a female involved.
Right.
She's now my wife. She was a group instructor at the gym, yoga instructor and a body combat instructor. And she was famous for just having this crazy voice. You could be in the Gold's Gym and that door to the group exercise room would be open and you could just hear, she's tiny, but you could just hear this crazy voice just coming out of that whole room and it would just light up the gym and the people like, oh man, Donna's in there teaching class again. And she's a doctor. And at the time she was doing an endocrinology fellowship at the VA. And they were studying growth hormone and testosterone. So I was like, man, this woman is amazing.
Right.
And
so training was her side, like her little side passion. She just loved doing that.
Yeah. So that was 2009. We got married in 2016, but we've been together ever since then. So
she's still a doctor. She's still doctoring.
She's in an internal medicine physician.
Cool.
So, if you go to the hospital and you get admitted, she's the person that, comes rounding on your room. And so that answered the question of, am I going to stay in this area? So I ended up staying. And after a few years of doing the personal training thing.
Now, were you living at home at the time?
I was. And then she and I moved in together in 2011, maybe. I don't remember the exact year, 2010, 2011. And then 2012, I started my own gym. I said, I can do this better than Gold's Gym and started my own performance training facility, House of Strength in Roanoke, and did that from 2012 to 2015. And, through that time, that's when, I got introduced to Bulletproof Radio, Bulletproof Coffee, started listening to all these podcasts, became, really aware of this idea of accelerated learning and, shifted my focus from reading everything I could about strength training to, as when you run a gym, you have to stop learning or stop reading all of the sets and reps stuff. And you have to start learning how to clean bathrooms and manage people and do marketing and make websites and, all that stuff. So, that was, those 3 years were probably, some of the best experience that I've ever had and some of the biggest growth. And that was really cool. That's where I met a lot of people who, we have in common as mutual friends. And then 2015, I sold the gym, went in full time with Natural Stacks, started hosting the Optimal Performance podcast in early 2015. And 2015 was the year I sort of transitioned out of the gym, went in full time with Natural Stacks, and then that's what I've been doing since then. So, I think that catches us up to now.
Yeah. What was the legacy of the gym? Is the gym still around?
It's not. There were a group of people in that area who were sort of acquiring some of the other gyms, and it's not the equipment is still around, and they've renamed some things and have different membership and things like that. But yeah, did you ever get involved in the CrossFit area? Like, were you ever part of that movement, or did you just kind of avoid that? It was always one of those gyms that looked like CrossFit, but it wasn't. We were never affiliated. I had a turf strip. We had the rig. We had, if you just walked in, it looked like a CrossFit facility.
Yeah, right.
Roanoke was a small town, is a small town. Yeah. And I think when I got out, one of the reasons I got out was that the market was oversaturated. There were when you look at the size of that area and the demographic of that area from a business perspective, there were not enough people and not enough people who could afford luxury gym prices.
Right.
To support, I think there were between 12 and 15 gyms that were of that nature in the Roanoke area at that time. And, I think there were 5 or 6 CrossFit affiliates. There were 3 or 4 performance training centers and, a couple other things like that. So it was just one of the reasons I didn't want to become an affiliate was by the time I started, there were already 2 other major affiliates in Roanoke, and I just didn't want to compete on that name.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Did you hang on to any of the personal training stuff? Were you training clients as a gym owner, and did you hang on to any of that stuff as you transitioned out?
I did. So as I transitioned out in 2015, the last 6 months, I coached a group, one of my classes at the CrossFit, that acquired some of the equipment, and then continued to do a little bit online, but in 2000, so that would have been the end of 2015, 2016, from then on, I haven't trained anybody in person, help people online and phone calls and stuff, but nothing in person.
You've really jumped all into what you're doing with Natural Stacks and
so I guess I've had this evolution 2 times now where when I was at Gold's, I realized that I was limited in who I could reach. If people didn't live in Roanoke and they weren't members of that Gold's gym, I couldn't help them.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
So by creating my own, it was, hey, I can help everybody or anybody in Roanoke. And then after a few years of that, I realized wow, Roanoke is just a drop in the bucket. There's so many more people online, and, I have the potential to have a much larger reach and help people on a much larger scale by moving online and doing it that way. So I think that was one of the other reasons that I sort of made that move.
Yeah. And how have you found that? Like, what's been the upshot of that? How do you like what you're doing, and how is your reach? Yeah. Are you connecting enough with people that I can imagine being behind the computer is different than being, one-on-one with people?
It's so different. Yeah, it's so different. And I'm curious to hear your answer to that question as well. Transitioning out of the gym. I mean, I just had this conversation with someone yesterday that I'm helping on the phone, and I told him, he's been listening to my podcast for 2 years, and I'm like, man, it's crazy. Like, I don't know you. I've never talked to you, but you've been listening for 2 years. In the personal training world or the gym owner world, you know this very well, the kind of relationship that you can develop with somebody over a month, much less 2 years. So it's very different. The way I describe it is, very one-sided. And it's interesting, I'll go to a conference like Bulletproof Conference, for example, and, have a lot of people will come up and say, I've been listening to the show. It's made this impact, and it's been helpful. It's awesome. And it's so cool to hear that. I love it. And it energizes me. But, I realize like that's one person or that's 2 people. And, I see our download numbers. I know how many there are. So it's just so weird, for that person, they know me intimately. I'm in their ears weekly. Right. Like all these hours that they're choosing to spend listening to you. And you don't get anything back.
Yeah.
It's really, really weird, especially coming from a background where, it's always been face to face. So I think from that perspective, it's been an adjustment. But also, again, like you look at these numbers and you see, well, wow, more people listened to my show, last week's episode than ever came through the gym doors, in 3 years.
Right.
So it's a trade-off. And I will say that I don't regret making that move. You also can probably speak to this when you own a gym. I mean, somebody's got to run the 5 a.m. class. And if a coach calls out and you're the owner,
you're the guy.
You got to be there. You gotta be there.
Right. God.
So, there are trade-offs. I mean, you have a lot more control over your schedule and what you do and when, which is beautiful. You're not sort of, locked into having to always be at the facility or it makes travel a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for me to go to conferences and meet people and do these things. So it's definitely a trade-off. And I think, if anybody listening is thinking about it, I think it's, you just need to consider what's important to you. What sort of impact do you want to have? What do you want those relationships and interactions to look like? And, how do you want your ideal day to be set up? And I think we try to reverse engineer it from how you answer those questions. For me, this is what I want. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to have sort of that freedom of, time and finance to be able to do what I want, when I want, experience everything that life has to offer, meet great people, and, go on these adventures, learn and share all of that with everybody.
Did you do that? Did you reverse engineer it and say, this is what I want my life to look like, and then I'm going to work it backwards, and this is what the life I'm going to create?
Yeah. So I think 4 Hour Workweek came out when I was in college.
Right.
And I remember very distinctly going home one time, whether it was a weekend or a holiday, I don't know. And I had the physical book. And I remember my dad seeing it, and I just remember his reaction. And, he's from that generation of, the opposite of the 4 Hour Workweek. And, he's, I'm his son, he's seeing me, and he's starting to see those wheels turning. And it's just like, not to say that he was discouraging, me from pursuing those things, but it's very hard to change the way people think. And, when we get so ingrained in those mindsets and those dogmas. But that was a book that made a big impact on me. And I think I can vividly remember that there's a worksheet towards the front of the book where he talks about, you outline your ideal life, most people think that they have to be a millionaire to have a great house and the car they want and, blah, blah, blah. And I know those are all material things, but, that's just the way that the worksheet is set up. It's like, okay, if you want a car that has a $1,000 a month car payment and a house that has a $3,000 a month mortgage, and you lay out exactly how much you need to make, and it's like you realize, well, hey, I can probably live the life I want to live at $10,000 a month, which that's still a lot more money than most people make, but it's also not a millionaire. And then you say, okay, well, how do I make $10,000 a month?
Right.
And what do I want to do? How do I get there? And I'm probably bastardizing that chapter of 4 Hour Workweek, but that is something that, sort of stood out to me even in college. And I never knew what I wanted to do, but I can very distinctly recall even in high school knowing that the one thing I didn't want to do was graduate, get a job, work at a cubicle, drive a minivan, have kids, like live that life that my parents led. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it for them, but there was like that whole generation that grew up with that being the American dream, and that wasn't my dream.
Right.
So when I read that book and it was like, here's how you avoid that life, I was like, all right, well, how do I do this?
Sure, yeah, I totally get that. There are parts of that resonate with me as well. Although I'm quite a bit older, and I remember getting a cassette series. This is back in the 90s of, how to live the life of your dreams. This is way before Tim Ferriss, did anything. And it was about creating passive income. And this guy did it through a newsletter, and he created a newsletter. And, I think back in those days, I want to say it was not even digital. It was an actual physical newsletter that you signed up for, and you had a mailing list. I think. I don't remember. Because let's see, when did email start? I would.
Oh man,
I don't remember when I got my first email.
I would have to say late 90s.
It wasn't late 90s, no, because I had email when I got my first job with a Fortune 500 company, and that was in 1994, 1993. Yeah, 1993. So, wow. Yeah, I'm old as dirt.
Yeah, I'm just like, I can recall dial up and instant messenger.
Oh, you had to dial up. You had to go through AOL Instant Messenger, AOL. You've got mail.
Remember all those free, like the CDs that would come with like 50 hours free or whatever.
Yeah. There was AOL. There was Netscape. There was it was just a weird, bizarre world. But so I very much relate to that, and I very much had the same kind of stuff going on, because those kinds of series, I remember listening to those cassettes, and I was like, God, this is phenomenal. It kind of led me down the path that I went down, getting out of corporate America and taking a risk, becoming a massage therapist and doing some other stuff. But it's really cool that you've been able to kind of engineer that, and maybe not knowing where you were going, but you certainly have gotten to a place that sounds much more. You don't have any ties. You don't have the gym. You don't have the 9 to 5. You don't have the requirements of a gym that a gym owner has. You have a very. It's kind of like, my life today now too is I can pretty much do this from anywhere. I choose to stay in Los Angeles because my wife is a muckety muck in the Hollywood world. She can't really leave. But I could do this from Timbuktu as long as I have an internet connection.
Yeah, and that was one of the goals, as Donna and I started to sort of plan and look at the next chapter of our life, 2014, 15, 16, we knew that as she finished residency, that we didn't want to stay where we were. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have the ability to go wherever, we wanted to live. And a lot of that was going to depend on, where she could get a job, but also, where we wanted to, settle down and, start that next chapter. So part of making that a reality was making sure that, I could do what I did from wherever.
Now, are you still in Roanoke now? To that regard, or are you somewhere else?
No, we're in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
July of 2016, we got married and then moved to Virginia Beach. Okay. She started, her career as a physician here in Virginia Beach last July.
And is this your plan to stay in Virginia Beach? This is your homestead, kind of, or not so much?
No, it's not that we don't like it here, but it's one of those places where, when we're honest with ourselves, it's not a place that we really envision our, staying for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So we've started to think about where that next move would be. Unfortunately, her parents, especially her father, are not in good health. And for the last few months, seems like almost every time she's off, we're driving. They live in Northern Virginia, and it's about a 4-hour drive from us. And it's just killing her and us.
Right. Like DC area, that Northern Virginia, or
about an hour west of DC. Yeah.
West of DC. Jeez. What's that? That's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. We're considering actually moving there so that she can be closer to her family.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it's definitely a move that we're doing to be closer to family and make things easier on, us with the travel. Because of her skills, as a medical professional, to be able to offer that assistance that her parents need right now. So it's one of those things where, if you don't, the way that we approached that decision was, sort of removing ourselves from the immediate and, putting ourselves 5 or 10 years down the road and looking back and saying, if you don't make this decision, is this something that you're going to regret not doing?
Right. So. Yeah, right. No, it's a really great way of decision making, to be able to, I think it was Chris Kresser yesterday that was talking about the rocking chair test. He's like, he pictures himself when he's, I don't know how old, 100 years old, 80 years old, sitting on the front porch, sitting on the rocking chair and looking back over his life and going, yeah, I remember when, and is this something that you'll be proud of? Is this something that you'd be happy with? Is this something that you'd regret, in the rocking chair test? And if it passes the rocking chair test in like, this is a good, wow, I'm really happy. It was a hard decision, but I'm really glad I made it. Then he knows it's the right decision.
Yep.
I really like that way of looking at things. So tell me now, or at least your past couple of years with Natural Stacks, what excites you? Where are you? Where is your, obviously you're experimenting with some pretty radical nutritional stuff. What is exciting to you today around training or nutrition or health or well-being that you're currently exploring, and want to spend time doing and bringing to the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've already talked quite a bit about the carnivore diet. I think that is something that really does excite me. I'm really, really curious to see where that goes. I think I'll make one of those predictions for next year. I think 2018 will be a year where carnivore diet sort of becomes in vogue the way keto became in vogue over the last, say, 18 months.
Yep.
I just think we live in one of those worlds where, everybody has shiny object syndrome and, you have a lot of fads and, that's not to say that it's not, that it doesn't work, that it's not beneficial to some people or some populations. But I just think that by the end of 2018, we may have a lot of people who are tired of hearing about carnivore.
Sure. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think that's
because it's very fringe. Because it's very fringe now. But you're right. I mean, things move at the speed of light in today's world, and what was fringe yesterday is potentially mainstream tomorrow. It could be gets picked up by People magazine. Boom.
Well, I mean, the guy who's the biggest proponent of it went on Joe Rogan. So
yeah, that's pretty big.
It's going to be mainstream after it's on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
To me, not necessarily for the diet itself, but for the questions that it's going to force us to answer.
Sure. Right.
The questions about micronutrients and microbiome and fiber. These are things that I think we've sort of, I don't want to say taken for granted, but, especially with micronutrients and fiber, we just said, okay, these are the recommendations, then, that's what we need to do. Mm-hmm. And we kind of left it at that. Like, I'm really curious to see where those questions and answers go. Beyond that, I'm really, really excited for next year. I've got 2 projects that, I have shifted my focus onto. I have actually, since 2015, I've been involved with Natural Stacks and hosting the Optimal Performance podcast. That era or chapter is coming to an end. I will be starting my own podcast in January 2018 called The Better Human Project. And I went to an event in September, the Success Live event, and heard a ton of really, really great speakers and people sort of affecting change at the world level. Peter Diamandis was there, and maybe one of those guys who had the tapes you listened to in the 90s, Les Brown. A lot of other people were there and spoke. And one of the recurring themes, and I think we're starting to see this in a lot of the circles that we run in as well, is that they really put a lot of focus on giving back and what do you do with your success and what does it mean, to have success if you're not giving back and using that success to help other people and bring other people along. And that really got me thinking. And it took me a couple of months to figure out, how I was going to do that and incorporate that. But with the Better Human Project, we are going to have the podcast on a platform called Patreon, which is sort of like a GoFundMe type thing where our listeners will be able to support the show. As a listener, you'll get content that is not released to the public. But what we're going to do is take that money and part of it will fund the show. Our long-term dream is to get this really cool RV retrofitted for audio and video studio that we can take to events, whether it be Ancestral Health or Paleo Effects or Bulletproof Conference, whatever, and hang out with people and engage and get content. But the big thing is that 50% of the revenue from that Patreon will go to either the research of our guests, people like Rhonda Patrick or Dominic D'Agostino, and then we're also going to give it to veteran organizations, charities. We'll be featuring people on the show who are sort of championing great causes, and then using the show to give them exposure for their platforms, but then also for whatever month they're on, that will be where the money goes. So I just want to be involved with something that has deeper meaning and gives back to people. Right.
That's really cool. Yeah. What do you see as the difference in focus between the your new venture and what you've been doing with Optimum Performance?
Well, the content on the shows will be very similar. I've really I've fallen in love with podcasting. I mean, I had a love for it before I started the Optimal Performance podcast, but doing it for 2 years, and I think you can probably speak to this as well. The real benefit is the connections and meeting new people and having conversations like these. That's why I do it. That's why I love it. And, to be able to, I think it's taking it the next step. It's not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but now it's, okay, how do we do this and use it to elevate each other and everyone else? So the tagline for the show will be better, do better. So it's not just, hey, let's build a following for the sake of building a following, but what are we going to do with this following? How is it impacting the world? What is it doing? So that's the question that we're trying to ask and answer and provide our community a way to get involved and affect that change.
Right. And you doing your own thing, like it's just time. It's time for you to kind of break out from behind the other brand.
Yeah, I'm not a co-founder of Natural Stacks. It was just it was a partnership that it was a good fit at the right time for both of us. And now it's a good time to kind of go our separate ways. I've got a book coming out in early 2018, and the book is going to be something that stands alone. It's not associated with Natural Stacks. So I think it just makes sense to, as I go out on this book tour and talk about the book and promote the book, I'm a standalone person. The book is a standalone thing. And when people ask, where can they get more of you, then it's come back to Better Human Project. And this is what we're doing.
What's the title of the book and what's the thesis?
I hope we can cuss on your show because the title of the book is Fuck Your Feelings.
I guess we can. I don't beep things out. So yes, it's totally okay. That's interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I'm sure you're familiar with, I just read, Jesus, what's the name of the book? I'm sitting on my desk.
Are you talking about Mark Manson's book?
Yeah, Mark Manson's book. Yeah.
So I think that's sort of the book that gives me the comfort level to be able to put that in the title. So
right.
Definitely thank him for kind of blazing that trail. Mm-hmm. The book is a neurobiological exploration of why some people have success and other people don't. It is, we've talked about decision making. So I forget who said the quote, but there's a great quote that says, if all we needed was more information, then everyone would be a billionaire with six-pack abs.
Yeah.
The reasons that we fall short of what we want to achieve and accomplish in our life are not a lack of information.
Yeah.
So the book is my way of exploring why we fall short of what we want to achieve in our lives. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten to interview neuroscientists and behavioral scientists and, look at things from, again, I am a scientist. I want to understand these systems. So, the book presents our biology and the evolution of, how we're wired, how our brains work, and, the survival aspects of this, why certain pathways do certain things. What really, really fascinated me and sort of drove the title of the book is the fact that 95% of our decisions are made based on how we feel in that moment.
Okay.
And that really shook me. And it also answered a lot of questions. Because, very organically, our conversation today has been around sort of decision making and, how do you stay aligned with what you're trying to accomplish throughout your life. And, one of the strategies that I've used that we've talked about a few times is sort of removing yourself, getting that 50,000 foot view, the rocking chair question, or, if I'm 5 or 10 years down the road, am I going to be happy with this decision? So you're immediately removing yourself from that instant. Yeah. And in that instant, if you make that decision in that instant, it's being guided by feelings. So it's a really, to me, it was a fascination with this topic, and it was go down this rabbit hole. And I'm excited to bring it to the world because I feel like I've connected a lot of dots between a lot of topics that people have heard and are familiar with, but don't necessarily understand the interplay and the relationship between certain things. There's a lot in the book about physiology, how our physiology actually impacts our emotions and our feelings from a neurobiological standpoint.
You mean like our wiring? Like we're wired that way, so of course we make those decisions. Of course we do that.
Right. And then it's, okay, understand this, learn how to control it, and get the output that you want.
Well, that's a good question. How do you control it? If we're wired to do it that way, it's kind of like the way we're wired to eat. Like we're to coin Rob Wolf's book's title.
Well, that's why the title is "Fuck Your Feelings."
Right.
It's learning how to create an awareness, realize that this is going on, and say, no, that's not what I want to do. This is what's aligned with my values and my goals. I'm going to make this decision. So I'll give you 2 things. One, the neurobiological definition of a feeling is a mental experience of a physiological state.
Okay.
So quite literally, our physiology dictates our feelings, which then in turn drive our decisions.
Right.
So if you can learn to change, and if you want to call it a biohack or whatever, I am specifically trying to avoid the word biohack with the book, but you could hack your physiology to change your mental status and your mood. Like we all know, like if I said, hey, you got 30 seconds, do as many burpees as you can, you're going to feel different in 60 seconds.
Yes.
Right? Your mood will be different. Your cognition will be different. The way you interact with the world will be different in 60 seconds because you changed your physiology from time 0 to time 60.
So wait, say that definition again, the definition of a mood, of a feeling.
So we have to be really careful with this. It's actually emotion. So emotions and feelings are different. And we dive into this in the book, but it is a mental experience of a physiological state.
That is emotion. Your emotion. A mental experience of physiology. So if you change your physiological state, your mental experience will therefore be, it can't help but be different because you're experiencing.
It has to.
Yeah. So which kind of explains the connection, the mind-body connection. That explains it right there. Right.
Yeah. So you go to a Tony Robbins event and he's famous for being able to change your mind. But what does he do first? He changes your physiology.
Your physiology,
moving,
right.
You're breathing, you're doing all these things.
You're jumping, you're screaming, you're clapping, you're, listening to loud music. Totally.
Yeah. Or go into a CrossFit gym. There's a reason that you do a WOD with music going. Like imagine going in and doing a WOD with 0 music.
I've done that. It's horrible. We did. So you're going to love this one. We did a 45 minutes. How many calories can you row? We had 12 people in the class. Thank God there wasn't me on my own. And right before we started, I'm like, so are you gonna let each person choose, a song and let us kind of cycle through the songs during everybody gets to choose one from Motivate Them? He goes, nope, no music. I'm like, what? I almost freaking went home.
That's crazy.
It was horrible.
So this is the second thing, to answer your question. We have multiple systems in our brain that are competing, sort of negotiating, playing tug of war at all times. One of them is our limbic system. It is a primitive portion of our brain that cannot think outside of the now. On the other hand, we have the prefrontal cortex, sometimes called the neocortex. That is the evolved brain, higher level cognitive function, executive function. So an example of these and sort of how they compete, the limbic system is wired. It's wired to be much, much faster. And that's part of our evolution. It is a survival thing. So if you imagine walking through a forest, like you're on a trail and your children are at your side and you see a snake on the trail a few steps ahead, before you can even say, stop, snake, you process that information, your hand comes out, you put your hand in front of their chest and you hold them back.
Yeah.
That's your limbic system. It's wired for survival and it is extremely beneficial in those circumstances. Now, there are other circumstances where it's not beneficial, and it's up to us to sort of develop this awareness and to realize which of these systems is working or controlling what we're doing. So, the overarching sort of argument with the book is that if you always allow your feelings to dictate your decisions, it's very hard to start at point A and end up at whatever your ultimate goal is.
You're living you're kind of living in your limbic system. You're living and you're getting, it's the tail wagging the dog.
Right. At any moment, you are subject to veer off course because you are allowing your feelings to guide that decision. So like, let's say you go down to Whole Foods or, you're in Erewhon or you're in LA. So if you go to Erewhon and you walk past the bakery, you're going to see some amazing looking foods, right? That immediate response of, oh my God, those cookies look so good.
I'm getting hungry just hearing about that.
I'm on the Whole Life Challenge. I'm not eating those this month.
Right.
That difference in timing, that first reaction is your limbic system. Yeah. That second reaction that says, oh wait, that's your executive function, part of the prefrontal cortex. So then it is develop that awareness and then learn to, part of this is in advance outline and define what your values are, what your goals are. We know motivation doesn't last.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions is awareness enough? Is awareness, because there's a lot of power in what we're talking about right here. I need to go back and re-listen to this after we're done because there's a lot of really good stuff right here, but it's just going to help my awareness. Can that alone lead to change?
No. That's the first step. It's a requirement. And it's the first step. It's sort of like you can't get stronger if you don't go to the gym. Like you have to show up.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not the best analogy. Awareness is the first step, and awareness gives you the ability. It creates choice, and it's what you do with that choice that takes the next step. So motivation doesn't last. We all know that, but values don't. It's much, much harder to be swayed off of your values than it is to be swayed off of motivation. Yeah. So if you can define values and then create action steps or create things that are acting in alignment with your values, then that sets you up for success so much more than, trying to act out of motivation.
Give me an example of that. Like, what do you mean? Let's just take this example of Erewhon and walking through the Erewhon. Where would the values come into play?
Here's a personal value for me. I don't eat anything that has added sugar.
That's a value, or that's a...
belief system, value. It's not a goal. Like I don't have a goal to eat less sugar.
Right.
I have a strict personal standard that I do not put added sugar into my body.
Well, I guess this brings up a good question: is how do you define values? Because when I think values, I think of things like courage and dependability and integrity. Right. I don't think of I don't eat sugar. Like that doesn't register for me as a value.
Right. Well, so let's say a value is integrity, right? And you're presented with an opportunity to have a modeling gig where you get on a billboard And in order to get that gig, you have to do something that blurs the lines of what you find an action, of integrity.
Meaning like you wouldn't, like something that you would not want on the front page of a newspaper. Like that kind of
something that you wouldn't want to tell your wife in 10 years, or something that you wouldn't want to tell your parents
or your kids.
That you would have to do something that you're not proud of to get that job.
Yep. Got it.
Right. So that would not be, a high integrity act. Right.
Yes.
So that's an example of, okay, I could do this and I'm motivated to get that paycheck. I'm motivated to have my photograph on a billboard in Times Square, or motivated to be able to say I was on this famous brand's campaign. But in order to do that, I would have to act out of alignment with a personal value. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to do that. Not that. So I think I go to, you wanted to stay with the Erewhon example. And I think that's one that we're faced with on more of a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, right. The food choices are definitely
right. So part of the book is talking about, focusing on actions, not outcomes. Right. And, we can bring this back to, sort of daily decisions, mm-hmm. Try to bring it back to like whole life challenge type stuff where, you may say, for 6 weeks, I'm not going to do this. Or, maybe beyond the challenge, you say, I'm a person who always takes the stairs.
Yeah.
When presented the opportunity. So now every single time you're in a position where there's an escalator and stairs right next to each other, you don't have to make that decision again. You make it one time. You define your value. That's who you are. And then you just become the person who takes the stairs.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because that is one of my, I guess, is a value of mine. I always take the stairs, period. Like look, I'll make an exception. If I'm in New York City and going to the 80th floor, I'm taking the elevator. But, like I did it. It's funny. I had to serve jury duty in downtown LA, and it was on the jury room was on the 11th floor or 12th floor, and I took the stairs and showed up all sweaty. It's kind of fun.
And that's sort of the next part of it all is sort of it's act as if you were that version of yourself, act as if you were that person. So, do you think Oprah gets up in the morning and checks her phone before she gets out of bed? Do you think she cares how many people liked her last Facebook post? So then it's look at whoever you want to be or however you want to be, and think about how that version of you or how that person would move through the world. And then start to model how you spend your time, how you move through the world in that way. The fastest way to become the person you want to be is to start acting as if you already were that person. Make that decision.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool way to, that's really cool. I like that way of thinking about that.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack because, it does involve, anatomy, biology, evolution. I had a lot of fun writing it. There's tons of sources. And I hope people find it as exciting as I have. And
what's the release? What's the release date?
We're shooting for early to mid-February.
Okay.
I'll get you a copy of it.
Cool. I can't wait. It sounds really intriguing. Like I'm really looking forward to. Do you have a way that you, like if somebody came to you and said, hey, I want to better define my values. I want to define my values, period. I've never defined my values before.
And that's such a great point right there, because, when we talk about these things like, values, like that's it's a word that we gloss over. Like how many people have never defined their values?
Right.
And I think what fascinates me about that is that if you don't know what's important to you, if you don't know who you are, what you stand for, how can you move through life with intention and with purpose to go from where you are to where you want to be? And, that's sort of one of the things that I sort of uncovered.
Well, you're defining your values by what you're doing anyway, but you might not know it. Your actions are dictating what your values are without you having conscious awareness of making a choice. You have made a choice because you're doing it.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And if you do it in that reverse order, then again, that's sort of letting your feelings, how you feel in any moment, is determining your decisions.
Right.
And if those decisions and those actions create your values, your legacy, how you spend your time, what you do with your life, my argument to that is that makes it very, very difficult to live the life that you want to live, be the version of yourself that you want to be.
You're not being Babe Ruth pointing to the outfield wall before he hits the ball. You're just saying, well, I hope it goes over, like I'm up to bat, and like you're not calling your shot. You're not calling your own shots.
And hope is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy. Yes, absolutely.
So, be very intentional, be conscious. And those are words that come up in the book a lot. And, if we define our values, so you ask how we do that. Yeah.
If somebody came to you and said, Hey, Ryan, I'm going to hire you to help me define my values. What would you do with them? How would you help them with that?
So what I normally do with people in that exact situation is I say, take a piece of notebook paper and write. I'm a big fan of actually writing, not typing.
Real writing,
yeah, handwriting. And write out 4 to 5 words that you want to describe you, the version of yourself that you want to be. How would someone else define that person? Mm-hmm. What are words that you want to characterize the way you move through the world, the relationships that you have, the projects that you work on? In this space, we have a lot of, entrepreneurs or people kind of doing great things. If you've defined your values, it makes it really easy for you to make decisions to say, is this activity, is this project something that I should get involved with? Does it match my values? And, we live in this world where, we need to learn to say no a lot more than we do. And it can make it easier for you to say no to people or projects or actions that are going to be distractions or, could be classified under shiny object syndrome. It doesn't make some of these things wrong. It just makes them wrong for you at this time. Mm-hmm. And I think those are really, really important distinctions that a lot of people need to make if we're really trying to be focused on moving our lives and our missions, our projects forward.
So is it as simple as just saying these are the 4 words and okay, this is going to be like, I want integrity, I want honor, I want, trustworthiness?
It is and it isn't. I mean, the words and the values will be different for each individual person.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of this thing that, just because you wrote it down today doesn't mean that those are the ones you're stuck with forever. And it doesn't mean that the first 4 that come out are the 4 that, right, are your best 4 or the 4 that you settle on or ultimately choose. I think it's an exercise that it's sort of a never ending thing. Like you kind of constantly need to be revisiting this and asking yourself, who am I? What do I stand for? Where am I drawing the line? How do I want to be seen? What is my legacy? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of pose that question and ask it, but I think it does involve a great deal more reflection and introspection than a lot of people get in today's world.
Yeah, like it occurs to me that it's not so simple as I want to identify my values and like I like hiring somebody to help you do that. Certainly there are exercises you can do that would make that easier, but one of them is simply journaling on a regular basis. Like just get in the habit of spending 10 minutes every morning writing out some things. Like I write what I'm grateful for not every day, but I try to do it every day. What I'm grateful for, successes from the day before, things I'm learning, and just to be in the practice. Nothing, does anything really important come out? Sometimes. But for me, it's more of a practice of, doing this. So, I think it's a really important topic. And I think that it's one of those things that people in our world, in my former world as a fitness coach, and a gym owner that I still think I'm in. I'm not really I kind of am in. I have a couple.
Really leave it.
Right. I mean, I don't leave the mindset, and I still coach a couple classes at the gym, and I still have I do some life coaching and some business coaching, but, I think it's an area that most fitness coaches don't have any training in, and they don't have any. It almost feels like a prerequisite that should be in place for anyone that's going to be a coach of any human being. They need to understand how people make decisions, and they need to understand why they're not, like how many times have you heard a trainer say, well, they're just not doing what I told them to do. Right? I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah. Right.
And so how do you deal? You're not a great coach if you just keep telling them the same thing and they keep not doing it. What do you do?
Right. We have more health professionals. Well, that's a huge umbrella term, but there are more people working in health, fitness, whatever now than ever before. We also have the highest percentage of obese and overweight people ever.
Yeah.
So something's not working. And again, it's not a lack of information.
Not a lack of information. I mean, that's been our premise of the Whole Life Challenge since we started it. In 2011, when we started this thing, we were like, we are not going to be the purveyor of a new dogma around the right workout, the right diet, the right amount of sleep to get. We're not. That's not the problem. There is so much information available on Google. You can find out what to do. The problem is you're not doing it. You're not taking the action. And, exactly. I'm actually working on a little article about that. You already know what to do. If I took a normal person who's not a fitness person, who's maybe slightly out of shape or whatever, and I stuck them on a deserted island and said, okay, you need to be you want to be in shape. They want to get in shape, or they want to, what would you do? Well, you have nobody to help you. You have no internet. You can't research anything. What would you do? Would you not know what to do and you'd sit on the beach and literally, not get into shape? Or would you figure out what to do? Right? Like it's pretty clear to me that you go for a walk. You'd maybe climb a tree. You might do some push-ups. Oh, you heard those might be good. And so what's the problem? Just start.
And the beautiful thing about that example is that in that vacuum, the individual would be forced to pay attention to themselves and their body and what works for them.
Yes.
And they would have to judge for themselves. They would listen to themselves. They would learn. They would become students. They would take responsibility for their own progress. And
because there was no other distractions. Nobody else is around. Right. Exactly. It'd be perfect. That's the word. That's the perfect environment for that.
And I mean, it's just fascinating that we lose that in today's world. I mean, we have more information than we could ever need, yet we have less action and implementation of that stuff. People don't take the responsibility for their actions or their own pursuits. And
it's the problem. It's the problem with, I lift my hand up because, I usually wear an Oura ring, and I was going to point to my Oura ring, but like my fitness trackers, here's my fitness tracker. Yeah. More data is not the answer. Fitness trackers are not the answer. You could, look, if the fitness tracker motivates you to go for a walk every day at lunch, okay, it's working. That's actually a great thing. If the fitness like one of the things that Oura Ring does for me is it gets me to focus on sleep and recovery. And so every morning I wake up, I look at the Oura Ring, and I have this little mini competition with myself as to, okay, I want the recovery number to be up high. I want I want those high numbers. So like I start going to bed earlier. So that actually does make a difference. But statistics and numbers and data does not drive the needle forward if it's not changing actions. And,
right. And that's why the Oura Ring works for you is, you see this thing and it actually drives an action.
Yes. Yes.
So the Fitbit was something that did that for me. I don't know if you ever had one, but at 10 minutes to every hour, if you haven't gotten 250 steps in that hour, it buzzes and it tells you, hey, you need this many more steps.
Would you start marching in place?
Yeah. So that's great. I don't wear one anymore, but I'm always cognizant of, have I moved this hour?
Yeah, right.
And somebody asked me, like, how do you get your steps in during the day? And one of the things I've done on some days, like on a writing day, if I'm at home and I'm not going to leave the house and it's not a lift day, what I'll do is I'll write with Pomodoros, and I'll just put a repeating timer on
20. Guys, Pomodoro is a technique, just in case you don't know, 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest. And the rest is just step away. And you put a timer on and you try to get through as many Pomodoros as you can. And, I don't know, 4, 5 Pomodoros.
I think it's, you do 2 hours. So it's 4 repeats.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the 4 repeats, you take a 30-minute break. And then you just keep on that cycle. But what I'll actually do is I'll extend it to 50 minutes and just put a repeating timer on. So like I'll sit down at 7 or 8 a.m. You
go 50-10, or is that what you do?
I'll go 50-10, and then on that 10 minutes, I'll go take 1,000 steps or something every hour. So I'm up, I'm moving. Maybe it's not a step. Maybe I'll do like 5-10 minutes of yoga or stretching or qigong or something. But again, it's being cognizant of the fact that physiology impacts cognition and feelings and things like that. But no, that's definitely a habit from the Fitbit. And that's one where it definitely drove change. And it wasn't about the numbers, but it was just, hey, this is something that I can implement into my life to get those actions that I want.
Do you implement those sorts of things? Like what are some of the things that you have in your life that you, like daily habits that you are just rigid about? These are things that I do every day, period, bar none, because it makes my life work.
That's a really good question. One that is actually fairly new is red light in the morning. I met the guys from Juve at the Bulletproof Conference, and I have a Juve unit. We have one in our home, and I have fallen in love with that. When I travel and I don't have it with me, I notice a difference.
I have no idea what it is.
It's a red light unit, and I forget the frequencies off the top of my head, but mine is, it has near and infrared. Infrared and then near infrared light. So I stand in front of it for 12 minutes, 6 in the front, 6 in the back, like 6 facing away every morning. And it exposes your, so these wavelengths penetrate the skin, and they help with cellular rejuvenation. I'm butchering a lot of the science on it. It's been a while since I talked to them, but basically it's like charging your batteries.
We'll put the link online and people can go read about it.
Yeah. So it's mitochondrial health. It's at the mitochondrial level, and it's essentially charging, they're called EZ zones. And it's basically charging your cellular batteries. Mm-hmm. So that's one that when I don't do that in the morning, I feel a big difference.
Wow.
And so I do that every morning. I go straight from there to a cold shower. That's another one that, this is a big part of, what's in the book is getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, seeking adversity.
Do you get in cold water? Do you just turn it on cold and hop in?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God.
After about 3 days, it's not a thing. Like
well, it is for me. It's always been for me. Like I mean, really? I've done it for the extended periods. I've done it for 30 days or whatever. But especially in the wintertime, I get really cold, and maybe low body fat or something. I don't know. Maybe being from Southern California, and I'm pussified. But I usually coax myself in. I go in and with hot water, and then 30 seconds in, I've gotten nice and cozy and warm, and then I'm like, oh, okay, now I can put that cold on.
I won't lie. I mean, there's a lot of mornings where I'm like, I don't want to do this, but as soon as you get in there, it's just like, oh, well, this isn't that bad. And then,
I mean, you go in cold water in Virginia. I mean, in the wintertime, that is cold.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah,
but. I had this conversation with Logan, actually, that if you start your day with a cold shower, there are some physiological benefits to cold water exposure. But for me, it's always been about the psychological benefits of knowing. It's sort of like, as Jocko Willink talks about, like it's that first victory of the day. You conquered, that fear of, I don't want to do this, but I did it anyway. Now, anything that shows up on my to-do list today that I don't want to do, I've already conquered something like that. It makes it that much easier to,
that's cool.
To knock out other things. And, like Logan said in our conversation about it was, there's just something powerful about knowing walking through your day, like knowing like, hey, I voluntarily got in a cold shower today. Like nothing can be worse than that.
There is, you're right. There is something valuable about that. And, I'm not going to do that today. That's good. Maybe tomorrow.
I'm trying to think of other like non-negotiables that I have to do. So I used to be pretty rigid about certain things. And what I found was that, I actually don't like routines because I think so many people start to put the power in the routine. They give the routine the power and they say, well, if I don't do my routine, I can't be me. I can't be that version of myself. And I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
As much as I travel, I've just sort of developed, this mindset of like, all right, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to sleep right. I'll feel good. And it's sort of that simplicity on the other side of complexity thing. And, so I don't have caffeine for the first 90 minutes after we wake up. I got that from Dr. Michael Bruce. It has to do with the cortisol. That's supposed to peak when we wake up.
Yep.
You and I talked before we hit record. We both love coffee. I do drink coffee almost every day. But I don't have it until at least 90 minutes after I wake up.
Oh, wow.
I stop caffeine at 2 p.m. So that it doesn't impact my sleep. I practice intermittent fasting. So my eating window is usually as small as possible. On the carnivore diet, I would have my first meal somewhere around 10 or 11, and then I would eat again between, say, 2 and 4, 2 and 5, depending on the day and kind of how my schedule and my lifts broke down. But, typically I'm fasting between 16 and 20 hours a day.
Wow. So that was you ate 2 meals and that was it. 5 o'clock rolled around. You finished eating, no more food.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I've always gravitated towards intermittent fasting. I've done some variation or version of that for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I started skipping breakfast. I'm having Dr. Michael Fung on the podcast soon, which I'm very excited about. But I read his book, 6 months ago, and started just experimenting with skipping breakfast. And the odd thing for me was I didn't feel any worse. In fact, I felt kind of better. And I started thinking, what was happening in all that food? And why did I think I needed it? And, in the mornings that I wake up and I'm super hungry, I eat. I don't try to deprive myself. But it's amazing what you can, my calorie numbers have gone down. I'm a little bit lighter. I haven't lost a lot of weight. I've lost like maybe 5 pounds. But it just makes me stop to think, was I just exercising my jaw and my jaw muscles and it was an exercise in my digestive system to see how quickly it can get rid of all that stuff, because it doesn't seem to have done anything.
Yeah. And I mean, that's another one, that we can question, at least growing up for me and I'm sure for you, I mean, we're from that age of, breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Absolutely. Right.
Is it? I mean, I know a lot of people who don't eat breakfast and skip breakfast. And
did the industrial food complex? Did the industrial food complex, plant that seed in our moms' minds and have them start saying it? And
I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah. No. Right. Exactly. I mean, Kellogg's. Of course they did. Like, why would they? Most important, start your day with a good breakfast. Mm-hmm. Let it start with Kellogg's. With Special K, with Frosted Flakes, Tony the Tiger.
Yep. That's
good stuff.
Do you know where cornflakes came from?
Oh, God. I hate to think.
So I probably tell this story way too much.
I have no idea.
Since you brought up Kellogg's and the industrial food complex. So in the late 1800s, there were 2 brothers, Kellogg brothers, and one of them ran a sanitarium. I forget how you pronounce it, but it was a mental institution. Mm-hmm. And he was an enormous advocate against sexuality, specifically masturbation. And he invented cornflakes as part of his anti-masturbation crusade. And his goal with them was to decrease testosterone, which would, in his hopes, reduce the incidence of masturbation. And his brother actually began packaging and selling them, created the business, and that became Kellogg's cereal. If you go to the Kellogg's headquarters in Battle Creek, Michigan today, in their lobby, they still have sort of this shrine to, their origins and that sanitarium that they ran in the late 1800s. And interestingly, Post, the cereal Post, was started by a guy. His last name was Post. He was a patient of Mr. Kellogg.
Whoa!
So that's where breakfast cereal. That's where breakfast cereal came from.
Oh my God! Do they actually? They don't tell that full story at the headquarters at Kellogg's.
I don't know if they tell that. No, that's
Kellogg's doesn't tell that story.
It's not good for business for Kellogg's.
No, of course not. No, of course not. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you have it. Well, listen, we obviously, if we continue meandering, we're going to be meandering for like 4 or 5 hours. It'll be the Joe Rogan podcast plus like 2 hours, which I love. But we didn't plan that, and I don't know if I have a strong enough listenership that they would actually hang with us for more than. I don't even know if they'll hang with us for this. They might have hung up after 20 minutes. Who knows?
They may have.
With podcast metrics now coming, it'll be interesting to see what people are doing.
Yeah, that will be very interesting to be able to see those that data.
It's funny because there's part of me that doesn't even really care. Like, I'm interested in having these long, deep conversations with people, and they don't happen in 20 minutes. So if people are only listening for 20 minutes, if I'm basing my podcasting on what other people are doing, then I need to stop. Because
I agree. I was thinking the same thing as you were going through that. Like, I'm curious to see what people do, but it's not going to change how I approach.
Right. I'm not going to cut people off after 20, 30, 40 minutes because that's what my audience is doing. Like,
right.
Sorry.
Right. No, I think if you do what you do, and you'll attract the right people.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And everybody else can just go F themselves, right? And F their feelings.
That's right. That's right.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and getting to know you better. And finally, after missing each other for many years now, we have hit. So
it's been a blast, and I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Yeah, me too. Me too. The Whole Life Podcast is produced by our podcast team: Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. The way that I've found is the best way to listen to podcasts is to subscribe so that episodes automatically get delivered right to your mobile device. You can do that in any podcast app on your phone. And hey, if you like the podcast, please do me a favor. Go to iTunes and give it a 5-star rating. And recommend it to your friends. I'm Andy Petronic, and thanks so much for listening.